You'll never figure out what I've done. Madeline sneered through the phone, her voice dripping with the same smug superiority I'd endured since childhood. You're not as smart as you think you are, Sarah. I tightened my grip on the phone, standing in my apartment's kitchen where I'd been chopping vegetables until her call turned dinner into an afterthought. The same kitchen where, 2 weeks ago, I'd opened a letter from my credit card company, questioning charges I never made. Madeline's words should have rattled me, but they didn't. It's funny you say that, I replied, forcing my voice to stay even. Because the bank manager just called. They've traced every transaction, every withdrawal, every single one. Silence. Then a sharp inhale. For a moment, her composure cracked before she recovered. You're bluffing, she scoffed, but the slight tremor in her voice betrayed her. I glanced at the pile of documents spread across my counter. Bank statements, credit reports, surveillance photos spanning 3 years. Proof of her betrayal, inked in black and white. Wanna bet? I asked softly. The story of how we got here is complicated, as most family stories are. Madeline and I were born 4 years apart, but the distance between us had always felt greater. I worked my way through college, balancing part-time jobs and scholarships. She dropped out after 1 semester, convinced the system was rigged. While I built a stable career as a financial analyst, Madeline bounced between get-rich-quick schemes, always looking for the next easy score. Our parents tried to support us both equally, but Madeline always needed more. More attention, more money, more second chances. And they always gave in. The first red flag appeared 6 months ago, when my credit card application was denied for debts I didn't recognize. At first, I assumed it was a mistake. Identity theft happens, right? But as I dug deeper, a pattern emerged. Small charges spread across different cards. Then bigger ones. Loans taken out in my name. An attempt to refinance my house. I hired a private investigator, expecting to uncover some faceless scammer. Instead, I found something much worse. Remember when I stayed with you last year? Madeline's voice dragged me back to the present. You should really be more careful with your mail, Sarah. You always were too trusting. That 2-week stay, her so-called fresh start, had been a cover. While I thought I was helping my sister get back on her feet, she had been stealing pieces of my life, one document at a time. Did Mom and Dad know? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. A dry, humorless laugh. They always liked you better anyway. The responsible one. The successful one. I just took what I deserved. What you deserved. My control slipped, my voice rising. You stole my identity, Madeline. You drained my accounts. Maxed out my credit cards, nearly ruined my financial future. How the hell is that what you deserve? Oh please, she scoffed. You can afford it, with your fancy job and perfect life. I needed that money more than you did. I thought of the sleepless nights, the countless hours spent undoing the damage she caused. The trust, she chattered. The bank has everything, I said quietly. Video footage of you using my cards. Loan applications with your handwriting. The direct transfers to your account. They're filing a police report. You wouldn't, she gasped. I'm your sister. You stopped being my sister the moment you decided to steal from me. The fraud department had been relentless in their investigation. 3 years of methodical theft, escalating as she realized I wasn't watching. I can pay it back, she said quickly, switching tactics. The same pleading tone she had used on our parents whenever she got caught in a lie. Just give me time. We can fix this. I stared at the final number on the bank's report. $147,000. There's nothing to fix, I said. The police will be contacting you soon. Get a lawyer. Sarah, wait. I hung up, my hands trembling as I set the phone down. The kitchen felt suffocating. I stepped to the window, staring out at the city as dusk settled over the skyline. The bank manager had been sympathetic. You'd be surprised how often this happens in families, he had told me. Most victims don't have the heart to press charges. But I wasn't most victims. My phone buzzed with a new message. Madeline, please don't do this. I'm your only family left. The cruelest part, she was right. After our parents' accident 18 months ago, we were all we had. But she had chosen to betray that bond. Another text. Madeline, I'll tell everyone you're lying. No one will believe you. I blocked her number. Relief. Sadness. The next morning, I met with Mr. Thompson at the bank. He laid out the documentation in a neat stack. We filed the police report, he said gently. A detective will contact you today. Are you sure you want to press charges? I looked at the evidence of my sister's lies. Each transaction. Each forged signature. Each stolen moment of trust. Yes, I said. I'm sure. Later, at the police station, Detective Sarah Martinez listened carefully as I recounted everything. How it started. How I uncovered the truth. The confrontation. Has she contacted you since? She asked. I showed her the messages. The threats. The manipulation. Family fraud cases are tricky, she said. Perpetrators often play the victim when the consequences hit. As she spoke, my phone buzzed again. A new number. Madeline, Mom and Dad would be ashamed of you. I showed the detective. She nodded, adding it to her notes. As I left the station, I felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter because I had finally taken action. Heavier because there was no going back. Madeline would face criminal charges. Our relationship, already fractured, was beyond repair. But then again, maybe it had been broken long before today. By the time I reached my apartment, my phone had multiple missed calls from unknown numbers. I ignored them. Tomorrow, I change my number. Inside, I sat at the kitchen counter, staring at the evidence of her betrayal. Bank statements. Fraud reports. Security footage. Everything that proved the truth. Madeline had stolen my identity, assuming I'd never figure it out. She underestimated me. This wasn't just about money. She had taken something far more valuable. My trust. My sense of security. My belief in family. But she had also given me something in return. Clarity. She thought I'd be too weak to fight back. She was wrong. This wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. 3 days after my meeting with Detective Martinez, the first real sign that things were escalating came in the form of a phone call from my Aunt Susan. My phone vibrated against my desk as I scanned financial reports. But the second I answered, she didn't bother with a greeting. How could you do this to your own sister? Her voice was sharp, laced with disapproval. Madeline's devastated. She says you're making up lies about her. I exhaled slowly, shutting my office door. Did she tell you what she did? About stealing my identity and racking up nearly $150,000 in debt under my name. There was a pause, hesitation. She said it was a misunderstanding. Something about shared accounts and confusion with the bank. She swore you're blowing this out of proportion. I resisted the urge to laugh. Aunt Susan, I have proof. Surveillance footage. Forged documents. Bank statements. This isn't some minor mix-up. She stole from me for 3 years. Silence stretched between us, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, she sighed. Your mother would be heartbroken to see you two like this. The words stung more than they should have. After I hung up, I stared blankly at my screen, my reports forgotten. Madeline was already spinning her story, painting herself as the victim before the truth could catch up. My phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Detective Martinez. Your sister turned herself in this morning. She's been processed and released on bail. Court date will be set soon. A mix of emotions hit me at once. Relief. Anger. Disappointment. A small part of me had still hoped that faced with undeniable proof, she'd admit what she'd done and try to make amends. But no. She was doubling down, rallying the family against me. That evening, as I stepped into the office elevator, my colleague Mark joined me. Tough day, he asked, noticing the tension in my shoulders. Family stuff, I muttered. My sister was arrested. His eyebrows shot up. Arrested? For what? For a second, I hesitated. Identity theft wasn't exactly a conversation starter, but staying silent had only ever protected Madeline. She stole my identity, I said simply. Loans, credit cards, even tried to refinance my house. Mark let out a low whistle. Damn, family's supposed to have your back, not stab you in it. Yeah, I murmured, thinking back to all the times I had defended Madeline, covered for her mistakes, given her another chance. They're supposed to. When I got home, a formal letter from the court was waiting for me. As I skimmed through the legal jargon, my phone rang again. This time, Jessica, Madeline's best friend. She's a mess, Sarah. Jessica said, skipping any pretense of small talk. She's staying with me because she can't afford her apartment anymore. The police took her phone and laptop. They're treating her like a criminal. I closed my eyes, exhaustion settling deep in my bones. She is a criminal, Jessica. She committed fraud. She stole from me. Those were her choices. But she's your sister. Can't you just drop the charges? She made a mistake. A mistake. That word, so casually thrown out, ignited something sharp inside me. A mistake was forgetting to pay a bill. A mistake was an impulsive purchase. What Madeline had done was deliberate. Calculated. I won't, I said firmly. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, Patricia Chen, to prepare for the upcoming court proceedings. Her office overlooked the city, the view making everything below feel distant and manageable. The prosecution has a strong case, Patricia said, flipping through files, multiple counts of fraud, clear intent, financial damages. They're offering a plea deal. I leaned forward. What kind of deal? Restitution of the full amount, plus 5 years of probation. No jail time as she completes financial counseling and community service. I considered it. The idea of Madeline in jail made me uneasy, but the thought of her walking away without consequences was worse. And if she refuses? Patricia's expression darkened slightly. Then we go to trial. If convicted, she's looking at 2 to 5 years in prison. My phone buzzed. Another relative, no doubt, trying to guilt me. I ignored it. She needs to understand that actions have consequences, I said finally. If she takes the deal, fine. But I'm not dropping the charges. Later that afternoon, an email arrived from Madeline herself. Her first direct contact since our confrontation. Asterisk, Sarah. I know you think I'm the bad guy here, but you've always had everything handed to you. Good grades, the perfect job, mom and dad's approval. I just wanted a shot at the same opportunities. The money was just sitting there in your accounts, and you didn't even notice it was gone. What does that tell you about how much you really needed it? I'm staying with Jessica now because I have nowhere else to go. Are you happy? You've ruined my life. I hope you can live with yourself. Madeline, asterisk. I stared at the screen, her words like venom. Even now she was justifying it, acting like she was entitled to what she took from me, like I was the villain for standing up for myself. I forwarded the email to Detective Martinez and Patricia without replying. The preliminary hearing arrived faster than expected. I sat in the courtroom, my hands clenched in my lap as Madeline was let in. She looked smaller, her usual designer wardrobe replaced by a plain, modest suit. She wouldn't even look at me. The prosecutor laid out the case, bank records, surveillance footage, forged documents. A timeline of betrayal spelled out in black and white. During a break, I stepped into the hallway for air. Jessica was waiting there. She's taking the deal, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. She wanted me to ask if you consider writing a letter to the judge about her character. I almost laughed. Her character? Even how she stole from me for years and then played the victim. Jessica flinched. She's still your sister. No, I said quietly. She stopped being my sister the moment she decided my financial security was less important than her wants. The rest of the hearing passed in a blur. Madeline formally accepted the plea deal, restitution, probation, financial counseling. She read a short statement, apologizing for her mistakes, but still weaving in excuses about our privileged upbringing. As I walked out of the courthouse, Aunt Susan caught up to me. "She took the deal," she said, as if I hadn't been there. "Are you satisfied now?" I met her gaze, tired of the guilt trips. "This isn't about satisfaction. It's about accountability. Madeline stole from me. She committed a crime. This was her choice. But she's family." I exhaled. Family doesn't steal from family. At home, I pinned the court letter next to the bank statement that had first ticked me off. Together, they told a story not just of betrayal, but of standing my ground. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Probably another plea for forgiveness. I deleted it without reading. Some messages didn't deserve a response. The first restitution payment arrived exactly 3 months after the court hearing. $857.42. Not even 1% of what Madeline had stolen. I held the check in my hands, the weight of it heavier than the amount itself. Proof of her betrayal reduced to a transaction. At the bank, Mr. Thompson greeted me with a sympathetic nod as he processed the deposit. "First payment's always the hardest," he said quietly. "Both to make and to receive." I nodded, words failing me. The amount felt both laughably small and impossibly large. Small compared to the damage he had done. Large in the sense that Madeline would be making these payments for years. A reminder, month after month, of what she had taken. That evening my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Peering through the peephole, I saw Jessica, shifting uneasily from foot to foot. I considered ignoring her, but something in her posture gave me pause. I opened the door but didn't step aside. "What do you want?" She hesitated before holding up her phone. "I need to show you something." Skepticism prickled at my skin, but I took the phone. My stomach twisted as I scrolled through the texts. Messages stretching back 3 years. Madeline bribing about forging my signature. Laughing about how easy it was to use my identity. Strategizing how to keep the fraud unnoticed. My voice was tight when I asked, "Why now?" Jessica swallowed hard. "She's been staying with me since the hearing. Last night, I overheard her on the phone. She's planning to contest the restitution. Finding loopholes to avoid paying you back." She was laughing about it. She finally met my eyes. I realized I've been enabling her too. The weight of her words settled between us. I took pictures of the messages with my own phone and handed hers back. "Does she know you're here?" "No, and she can't?" A pause. "But you deserve to know the truth." "She's not sorry, Sarah. She's just sorry she got caught." After Jessica left, I forwarded the messages to Detective Martinez and Patricia. Their replies came swiftly. "Detective Martinez, this shows clear premeditation. Keep documenting everything." "Patricia, this could impact her probation terms. We'll file a motion in the morning." I reread the texts, bile rising in my throat. One in particular stood out. "Sarah's so stupid. She trusts me to houses it and doesn't even check her mail for weeks after. It's like she's begging to be robbed." My phone buzzed again. "Aunt Susan." I debated ignoring it but answered instead. Jessica showed me the messages. She said, her voice raw. I had no idea. A shaky breath. "I owe you an apology. I should have listened instead of believing Madeline's version." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." "Your mother?" She hesitated. She always said Madeline had a gift for telling stories. I guess we never realize how many of them were lies. The next morning, I met with Patricia. Her office, once an intimidating place, now felt like solid ground in the chaos. "These messages could be considered a probation violation," she said. "If the judge agrees, she could face stricter monitoring or jail time." I exhaled slowly. "File the motion." The hearing came faster than I expected. This time, Madeline didn't look small or remorseful. She sat stiffly beside her lawyer, her glares cutting across the courtroom. Her attorney argued that the messages were old, that they didn't reflect her current mindset. The prosecutor countered with Jessica's testimony and recent evidence of Madeline actively plotting to avoid restitution. When the judge invited me to speak, I stood without hesitation. I agreed to the plea deal because I hoped my sister would take responsibility and learn from this. But I see now that was naive. She hasn't learned anything. The only thing she regrets is being caught. The judge turned to Madeline. Would you like to respond to your sister's statement? She stood, her face twisted with resentment. She's always been the perfect one. She spat. The responsible one. She doesn't know what it's like to struggle, to watch your sister succeed at everything while you can barely stay afloat. Yes, I took her money. But she had plenty. She didn't even notice it was gone until the banks told her. The judge's expression hardened. Ms. Mitchell, your statement suggests a troubling lack of remorse. Your sister's financial stability does not make your actions any less criminal. In the end, Madeline's probation terms were tightened. Mandatory financial counseling, monthly check-ins instead of quarterly, and a clear warning. Any mispayment or further attempts to evade restitution would land her in jail. Outside the courthouse, Jessica was waiting. She knows I gave you the messages, she said quietly. She's been evicted from my place. She says I betrayed her. Welcome to the club, I said without bitterness. Jessica sighed. I thought I was being a good friend by covering for her, but I was just helping her hurt people. That evening, I received an email from Madeline. Subject: Hope you're happy. You've taken everything from me. My freedom. My home. My best friend. You probably think you're teaching me a lesson, but all you're teaching me is that I was right about you all along. You care more about money than family. I have to live with what I did, but you have to live with what you did too. Remember that. I forwarded it to Detective Martinez without responding. Later that night, I sent it through old family photos. Madeline and me laughing on the beach. Having at my college graduation. Christmas morning, matching pajamas. When had it changed? Or had it always been this way and I had just refused to see it? My phone buzzed. Aunt Susan. Found these while cleaning out the attic. Thought you might want them. Attached were photos of Mom's old journals. Entries about her worries for Madeline. Hopes that she'd find her way. Fears that enabling her wasn't helping. She struggled with this too. Aunt Susan wrote, wanting to help but knowing sometimes help means saying no. I sat with that for a long time. Outside, the city lights flickered. Somewhere, Madeline was facing her first night without a safety net. Part of me worried. A larger part knew this was necessary. Not just for me, but for her too. Another text came in. Detective Martinez. Just checking in. How are you holding up? I'm okay, I replied. Learning that sometimes the hardest part of loving someone is letting them face consequences. That's wisdom, she wrote back. Hard-earned wisdom. I glanced at the old Christmas photo one last time before tucking it away in a drawer. Some memories needed to rest. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt until both sides acknowledged the damage. Tomorrow would bring more challenges. Another restitution payment. Another guilt-laced phone call. Another attempt by Madeline to escape accountability. But tonight in my quiet apartment I was at peace. She had stolen my identity, but she hadn't taken my strength. And that she could never touch. 5 years after Madeline's betrayal unraveled my life, I sat at my desk, staring at a familiar envelope. The final restitution payment. Inside was a check for $857.42, the same amount as always. But this one felt different. It wasn't just money. It was an ending. A closing chapter to a story I never wanted to be part of, yet one that had reshaped my understanding of family, trust, and forgiveness. For years, these payments had arrived with varying degrees of drama. Angry notes, desperate pleas, or sometimes just silence. Like this one. A check in an envelope, nothing more. I picked up my phone and dialed Mr. Thompson. He answered on the second ring. The last one, he asked, his voice knowing. Yeah, I said, steady but unsure how to feel. It's over. Would you like me to handle it, or are you coming in? I thought about the first time I'd walked into that bank, blindsided by what Madeline had done. I was different now, stronger, wiser. I'll come in, I said. Feels right to close this in person. Walking through the bank doors, I felt the weight of 5 years pressing against me. Mr. Thompson processed the deposit, then hesitated. Your sister called yesterday, he said carefully. She asked if I could pass along the message. I exhaled, unsurprised. Madeline had been reaching out for months, ever since she completed probation. Each time I had ignored her. What did she say? She wants to meet. She says she's changed. I let the words settle. According to Aunt Susan, Madeline had been in therapy, held steady employment, and had finally started taking responsibility for her actions. Jessica, too, had mentioned how different she seemed. But did that matter? That night, as I reviewed my final bank statement, restitution paid in full. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessica. Her today was the last payment. How do you feel? I stared at the words, unsure how to answer. Relieved. Sad. Free. Uncertain. All at once. I typed back, lighter, I think. But also not sure what comes next. Her reply was immediate. Madeline asked me to tell you she's changed. She understands if you never want to see her again. But she'd like a chance to apologize. A real apology this time. I set the phone down, walked to the window. The same city lights that had been my silent witnesses through years of anger and healing now flickered with an unfamiliar question. Did I want to hear her out? The next morning, an email from Madeline awaited me. Subject: I understand if you say no. Sarah, I know Jessica has probably reached out. Before you delete this, please know I understand if you don't want to see me. I've learned a lot about boundaries in therapy, and I won't push hers anymore. The monthly payments were a constant reminder of what I did to you. Every time I wrote a check, I had to face the reality of my betrayal. I had so many excuses before about fairness, about family, about how you wouldn't miss it. But none of that matters now. I hurt you. I stole from you, and I justified it to myself in the worst possible ways. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for us to be sisters again. I just want to apologize in person, properly, for everything. If you're willing, I'll meet you anywhere, anytime. If not, I'll understand. Madeline. I read it once, then again. No manipulation. No excuses. Just accountability. After a long pause, I responded with a time and place, a public cafe where we used to spend lazy afternoons before everything fell apart. Within minutes, she confirmed. The day of the meeting, I arrived early, choosing a seat near the door. Old habits. When Madeline walked in, I barely recognized her. Gone were the designer clothes, the polished facade. She looked real. Different. She hesitated, waiting for permission. I gave a slight nod and she sat. Her hands shook slightly as she folded them in her lap. Thank you for meeting me, she said quietly. You look well, I offered. It wasn't small talk. It was true. I am better than I've been in a long time. She took a deep breath. Sarah, I've rehearsed this 100 times, but now that I'm here, I don't know where to start. Start with the truth, I said. That's all I ever wanted from you. She swallowed, blinking back tears. The truth is, I was jealous. Not just of your success, but of you. You always knew who you were, what you wanted. I felt lost. Taking your identity, it was like trying to steal your confidence along with your credit cards. It was wrong. And I'm so sorry. For the first time in years, I saw her clearly. Not the version I wanted her to be. Not the version I hated. But the complicated, broken, human version. We talked for hours. About therapy. About choices. About the long road she had to walk and the one I had walked alone. As the cafe began closing, she stood. Thank you for listening, she said. I know this doesn't fix everything. No, I agreed. But it's a start. That night, I sat by my window one last time, watching the city lights flicker. 5 years ago, Madeline stole my identity, thinking she could erase her own failures by taking something that wasn't hers. But in fighting to reclaim what she took, I had found something greater, an identity that wasn't just about money or family, but about strength, truth, and self-worth. This final payment had closed one chapter, but another was beginning. One built not on obligation, but on choice. Some wounds never fully heal. But sometimes healing isn't about erasing the past. It's about learning to carry it differently. I was ready for whatever came next. Whole. Strong. Free.